Hello and welcome to week 22's Dinosaw. This is June 2020, so the first week of June, and here are 7 more interesting, curious, innovative things I thought you might like to see. First of all, cow farts, obviously. So some stats behind this one. This is what caught my eye. So 5% of the world's greenhouse gases are produced by cows, essentially farting and burping. If all the cows in the world were a country, as far as their emissions go, they would be the 3rd largest emitter in the world, behind the US. So China, the US, cows, then India. And also cows produce twice as much greenhouse gases as the entire aviation industry. So they're pretty big. So this is a company called Volta Green Tech, and they've got a patent essentially on using red seaweed to reduce the emissions from cows, shall we say. So it's a feed additive. You put it into the food and it reduces their farts and their burps by 80%. So I just thought it was interesting. There's quite a lot of, how do we fix the greenhouse gases, and a lot of those solutions are quite technical. Some of them you just need to go to the cows and sort that out. So yeah, interesting. Have a look at that one. The BEEB voice assistant. So this was announced a couple of years ago and is now in trials. So if you are part of, I think it's the, what's it called? The Windows, I've got it written down somewhere, the Windows Insider program. If you're part of the Windows Insider program and you have a Windows 10 update as of May, you have what you need. So you go along and you can then download this from the Windows Store. So what it is the BEEB's version of a voice assistant. So this is like Siri, or it's like Alexa, for instance. However, it's got a few really interesting things. It's the BBC, first of all, and it goes alongside the BBC programme, so you can ask it all about Radio 4 or whatever it is. But it's a northern voice, which I thoroughly approve of, so it'll say things correctly, like glass and pass and bath. Which is the right way of saying it. You can also ask it some interesting questions based on TV shows as well. So if you say, ask me or tell me a fact, it will actually, Sandy Toksvig will come on and tell you an interesting fact. And likewise, if you say, tell me a joke, you will have jokes from BBC Comedy. So they've actually got comedy writers actually working on the content of this thing as well. The interesting part of the demo is, unlike Alexa or Siri, which have some problems with regional accents, especially in the UK, this demo at the moment is also being used to try and listen to all the accents around the UK to then learn from them as well. So by the time it does launch, it will be far more accent aware or regional accent aware than you would have thought it would be. So if you're Scottish, Northern Irish, from London, from Cornwall, wherever, hopefully it will understand what you're trying to say to it. Mini livers. Now, this is more than mini livers, but essentially what scientists have done is they've taken human skin cells, they've essentially reduced them to stem cells. They've then manipulated the stem cells to grow into liver cells. So that's great. And they've built, I don't know what scale this is, but imagine this will fit inside a rat, essentially this thing that you're seeing in front of you right now. So this is a mini liver grown from a single skin cell, and it knows what to do. So it grows everything it needs to do. It can create bile, urea. It does all the things that a liver needs to do. By the time it's actually transplanted in, it's got blood going through it. It goes the right brown color. It's amazing. So why am I explaining this? So what they've done, the scientists have created these mini livers, and eventually the holy grail is to create full-size ones. However, the mini liver has been created. It's unreactive, so basically it's inert. So you do not need any immunosuppressant drugs once you've had the transplant. Great. So this is all looking good so far. And what it also does is it means you can then grow transplant organs basically in a lab. So you do not need human donors. So anybody who's waiting for a liver transplant or whatever it might need to be can have one off the shelf, essentially. So they've implanted some into rats to make sure they work. So sorry for the rats, but apparently they worked. So everything's looking good at this point. So the interesting part of this is eventually you'll get these essentially lab-grown organs. Awesome. But the interesting part I read about it was that actually, because they've grown small ones at the beginning, it did sort of start to kind of make this you can actually have extra organs implanted as well. I thought it was quite an interesting idea that if you're, for instance, your kidneys are not functioning correctly right now, but they can actually recover, then you can have essentially a mini kidney transplanted in just for now, like a sort of a backup kidney. So, you know, I thought that was quite interesting. Like, well, you could pack yourself with extra organs when you needed a bit of help. However, so that's all taking place. Trackable fruit actually takes a bit of a sinister turn at the end of this one. Essentially, I'm talking about this for years, and I've written a few articles about smart dust and about nobody knows what to do with it. So I just made up some stuff, and it was all about tracking fruit. Essentially, smart dust is essentially a mini. You could use it as a mini barcode, spray it on things, ingest it, and you can track the poo essentially wherever it's gone. That was my article. So this is more slightly more palatable. So what scientists have done is they've taken bacteria and yeasts, I think it is. They've taken their DNA and they've sequenced the DNA in a very specific way so that you can essentially, the DNA becomes a barcode. And then if you then take those DNA fragments, you can then take different parts of the bacteria to create essentially an infinite amount of unique barcodes in the bacteria. So if you get a spray can of a very unique bacteria barcode, which is an inert bacteria, it's around us all the time, and you sprayed it onto a plant as it's growing, after 8 weeks you can stop spraying it. It's got enough of this stuff on it. If you then harvest that plant and wash it, and you can do whatever you want to do, this bacteria is not going to leave it. You can then track that plant all the way through packing, transport, delivery, whatever. And if you get this piece of fruit at the end of it, you took a swab of it and sent it away to a lab, it can tell you exactly what the DNA sequence was. And if you then check that, and probably on a blockchain, you know where it came from. So, you know, it's fully trackable all the way through. So that's great. So it's an inert thing, and you can start tracking things like fruit and vegetables. And there's always some crisis somewhere about Romany lettuce causing E. coli. So that's good. What was interesting about the report is right at the end of it, it sort of says, and by the way, it also works for humans as well. So if you spray this onto a human, actually, if they had a couple of showers, it would still prevail onto them. And 4 days later, you could just about track this bacteria on them. So for instance, this is what I would take it, if you went through a maybe an airport or a big transit hub, and this was in the air conditioning, so there would be a Heathrow airport bacteria. When you turned up in your final country, somebody could take you on side, take a quick swab and go, oh yep, you came through Heathrow. So I'm always a sort of, I've never watched the series, but I'm always a sort of Black Mirror thinker. Interesting, tracking fruit and bacteria DNA. DYSON, late last year, announced that he was stopping his Dyson EV project, so his car project. So everybody was like, we've heard about it, but we don't really know anything about it. It was very secretive. It was all done at an ex-air base in Wiltshire. So they put in a huge amount of money. There was a lot of backing behind this, so £2.5 billion, I think it was, backing, of which James Dyson actually stumped up about 500 million of his own money. So don't feel sorry for him. I think he's still at the top of the UK's rich list. I think he's got something like 16.7 billion personal fortune. It's a big chunk of money. When it was cancelled, nobody really knew about it. They all thought, that was a bit weird. What was going on? There must be a reason that somebody like James Dyson has cancelled his EV, but we didn't know much about it. So Autocar had an interview and exclusive access to the airfield and the prototypes, which is what you're seeing in front of you right now. So it's really interesting having a look at the car itself. The interior was quite interesting. The wheels were huge, 20-inch wheels, I think, or something like that, even bigger. And also did 600 miles of range, so huge batteries in it. So it would have been an industry leader. Now, the reason it was canned is that once they'd done the maths of it, they'd have to sell it for £150,000. And of course, EV prices are coming down. There was just no market for it right now. So you've got people like Tesla and the kind of the super luxury EV market, and even those aren't £150,000. So there was just no market for it in the end. However, it looked like this, and it was going to be an amazing interior, 7-seater, that sort of thing. So if you're interested, follow the link. There's some great videos and lots of screenshots and things like that. Dark solar panels. So in energy news, so solar panels usually work from silicon and need as much sunlight as they possibly can to generate an electron flow. This is a new technology that uses light and dark to generate the flow. Now, what that really means is if you are using solar panels and you don't have full sunlight, you'll have an inefficient solar panel. This one actually gets more efficient the more shadow is put on it. So it uses two types of metals. Essentially, the top one's gold, and if that is in full sunlight, it creates electrons and it tries to flow to the dark bit. So any part of it in shadow, it will try to make the electrons flow to the dark bit. So it needs shadow and light to make it work, and it's 200% more efficient than a normal solar panel. So if you are using solar panels and they're suboptimal, for instance, so they're in shade or dappled light or whatever, then this is a really good step forward in solar panel technology, because it can work in suboptimal light conditions and actually needs shadow to actually work. So it's called, there's some great name for it, I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's basically dark solar panels. And finally, it's a really interesting interview of the US Air Force. It was about an hour-long podcast, or a video podcast interview, very eloquent about the future of AI, machine learning, and the future of warfare in the US Air Force. So what they did mention in that was about, which is a bit that really sort of pricked my ears up, was that next year, next July I think it is, they're going to have a match between a human pilot in probably an F-35, the latest aeroplane, which is what you can see before you now. And I think it's probably an older airplane, like an F-16 or something like that, which will be drone computer controlled. So they want to do this next year, that they're aiming for it, and they don't see why it wouldn't happen. So I think that'll be a really interesting showdown. So the holy grail is not to have one or the other, but to actually have both. So to have a human pilot with an augmented capability. Elon Musk, I think last year, wrote a little bit about this as well, about actually the holy grail is to have both. So yeah, so watch that AI-driven fight between a human and an AI drone next year, next July. And with that, we are done. So thank you very much, and hopefully we'll see you next week.